Kadosh, Boker Tov. I wanted to share with you a beautiful idea that I saw in the Parashat. We know that this Parashat, which is Shabbat Noach, speaks about the Teva and Noach with the Hamabul, with the flood that came, and he had to hide himself inside of a Teva. After being in the Teva for such a long time, Noach wants to go to the outside world. So he opens up the Teva and he sends out, through a little window, he sends out the raven, the Orev, and then afterwards he sends out the Yona. It says in the Pasuk, "V'tavo elav Yona le'et erev, v'hinei ale zayit tara b'fiyah." The Yona comes back to him and tells him, he brings him anale zayit, right, which is basically from an olive tree. He brings him a branch from an olive tree that he had in his mouth. Rashi there quotes the Gemara. The Gemara says, Amra, she comes, the Yona, right, is telling Noach, Yiyu mezonotay merurin kezai biyado shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, velo metukin kidvash bidei basar v'dam. I prefer that my parnasa, my mezonot, should be bitter like an olive, but in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it shouldn't be sweet like honey, but in the hands of a human being. In the Bereshit Rabbah comes, and he brings in the Midrash, Remez Rimzalo, he gave her a hint. She gave him a hint to Noach. Amralo, she told Noach, Mutav morzeh mitachat yad HaKadosh Baruch Hu, velo matok mitach yadcha. I prefer to have bitterness in the hands of Hashem and not to have sweetness in your hands. So now the question that we're going to ask ourselves is, first of all, a few things. What exactly is this Yonah telling Noach? Right? Why is this happening right at the end? So the Ramban says that she was giving her a message. Obviously, human beings, that they don't want to have parnasah from each other, so obviously they prefer that it should come from Hashem, even if it's going to be bitter, than coming nicely sweet, coming from a friend. However, though, we have another question that we have to try to understand. And the question is, what exactly is going on? Where's the Hakarat HaTov? The Yonah is being fed by Noach for one entire year. They were in the Teva for a year. Where's the Hakarat HaTov? Saying at the end of the day, the Yonah couldn't have told Noach, Chazak u'baruch, thank you very much for everything that you've done for me for the past year. You've given me parnasah, you've given me everything. And now he comes and he says to Noach, by the way, you should know, I prefer it to be bitter in the hands of Hashem and not to be in your hands. What a slap in the face is that? What's going on also? And the entire thing with what's going on in the Hamabul, right, that everything was destroyed. So then, now all of a sudden we need these words of the Yonah to come and teach us a message. What exactly is going on? So therefore, we're going to go to understand what exactly happened with the story behind Noach. There in the same Gemara, there's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, right? The Gemara is in Kufchet, Amud Bet 108b. It speaks about what happened with Noach and the Teva. And it says something very interesting. The Midrash Tanchuma says that on that year, Noach hardly slept. Why didn't he sleep? He had to feed the animals at all times during the day. And that means every animal, they eat different times of the day. And he had to prepare all the food and give them to them. The Midrash brings down that once happened that Noach was a little bit late to give the lion to eat. And what happened? The lion came and he caused him damage. He started becoming lame. Why? He hit him on the thigh and that's it. So you see that it was like a punishment. So the Ramban actually says on Bereshit Vav Yutet, you have to bring, right, these to the Teva. You have to bring all these animals to the Teva. And he says like this, Tzivau shi'itasek v'ya'azor otam hu b'knisatam b'teva v'yishtadel b'hem shiyichyu kasher yishtadel b'nafsho. What does that mean? He was commanded that he has to help them, to bring them into the Teva and to make them live, just like he does for himself. So there was a special mitzvah that Noach had to give to eat all the animals. Now, why exactly? So Rashi says that what was the reason why the Dor Hamabul were going to be destroyed? It says, Vatishachet haaretz. What is Vatishachet? It became corrupted. What is corrupted? Lashon erva v'avodah zarah. Whether it's immorality or idolatry. And immediately afterwards it says, Vatimalei haaretz chamas. Right? What the land became full of chamas. What is chamas? Stealing. Gezel. So says Rashi that even though they had also immorality, also idolatry, and also stealing, lo nechtam dina gzar dinam el lagazel. Everything was signed. Their fate was signed because of stealing. Now, what does this mean? There's a common denominator in all of these three sins. And the common denominator is that the roots of sin, and this is the root of the sin of the Dor Hamabul, of the generation of the flood, was people, they were self-centered. They were egoistic, egocentric. They were loving only one person, and that is themselves. The shoresh, the roots behind whether it's going to be gezel, stealing, is because I love myself. I love myself so much that anything that anybody else has, it's also mine. I want it for myself, so I'm going to just steal it. And then the same thing will happen for whether it's going to be immorality, that they'll come and they'll take their friends' wives, because everything belongs to everything. They just want to fulfill, because the entire world is centered around themselves. And this we see why, after they were already decreed to be destroyed, Noach has to fix the world. He has to do tikkun. What's the fixing of the world? The fixing of the world is that he has to bring all the animals inside, and then what does he have to do? He has to give to them. Nothing to do with himself anymore, always to do with them. Why? What's the difference between an animal and a human being? The difference between an animal and a human being is that a human being, he has a ruach memallah, he's able to speak. Animals do not talk. You have to read their minds. You have to understand what they need. An animal, right, when he's, right, not like the human being, he can't ask for his necessities. So it comes out that for a human being to give to an animal, that's the highest level of giving, because that means you're giving without being asked for it. You're giving without expecting anything back, because the animal is not going to pay you back because you came and you gave it water or you gave it to eat. And therefore, the biggest tikkun, the way to fix the sin of the Dor Hamabul, of the flood, was in order to give on the highest level of giving. Noach had to go into the teva, which was a purification process that we spoke about in the past. And all of a sudden, he had to come giving and give and give and give an entire year just of giving on the highest level. And that's why when it once happened that he was late in giving, there was a kpedah, there was a stringency. 1 second, it was strict on Noach. What is this? You have to give on the highest level. And now we actually understand what the Gemara says in Sanhedrin. The Gemara says that entire time that they were in the teva, they weren't allowed marital relations. Now, the reason why is because how could it be, right, that a person comes, we thought was because, like Rashi says, Shaya b'shari b'tzad, if the entire world is suffering, how could you be enjoying yourself? But the real reason behind it is because the person had to stop thinking about themselves in order to think about everybody else. So if you're not thinking about yourself, you're not thinking about your own pleasures. You're only thinking about everybody else. And that was the fixing of the world that Noach had to do for a full year until he was able to open up the doors and build and to bring up a new world up to place. So now, immediately right after, right, the Hamabul, he comes and he sends, the first person that he sends out is the Orev. And the Orev comes, the raven comes and says something very interesting. Listen to this Gemara. The Gemara again in Sanhedrin 108b says, Amar Shakish, Teshuvah nitzacha teshivo Orev leNoach. The Orev, the raven came and said something incredible to Noach. Listen to the words of the Orev. Amar lo, says the Orev, the raven to Noach, Rabbecha soneani ve'ata sanetani. Your master hates me and you hated me. Why is who's the master of Noach? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbecha soneani. Why does your master hate me? Mina teorim shiva. Mina temeim shenayim. Every pure animal that went into the teva, how many animals were brought in? 7. From every impure animal, how many animals were brought in? 2. So comes a raven and tells Noach, your master Hashem hates me. Because why is it that, where's the favoritism? What's going on over here? Why is it that the other animals are getting 7 and we're only going to bring 2? What's going on? And the truth is, even from there, Noach learned to bring the korban from that. Because he thought to himself, if I have so many extra pure animals, it means that I should bring an animal from the pure animals. So now he comes and he switches. So not only does your master hate me, you hate me. Why? Because if you have 7 animals of pure animals, why are you sending me that I'm only not pure? There's only 2 in the world, right? What's going on? What's going to happen if something happens, an accident? I'm going to become extinct. So why aren't you thinking about me? Yeah? Noach does not answer this question. But now there's a second question asked. Oh, Shema liishti eta tzarich? Says the raven to Noach, maybe you want my wife. Maybe you want the raven, the female raven. And that's why you're trying to send me away to get me killed? Amarlo, says Noach, Rasha. He tells him, Rasha, wicked person. Bemutarli ne'esarli. Even that which is permitted to me, which is my wife, was prohibited to me. Bene'esarli lo kol sheken. Something which is prohibited to me, which is an animal, shouldn't be kol sheken, that I'm not going to go with an animal? What are you doing? But now 1 second, did you realize that Noach only answered the second question when it had to do with the wife? It didn't answer the first question, which is, what about with the 2? What's going on? Yeah? So the Gemara immediately afterwards comes and says something interesting. Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a Braita. Shlosha shimshu bateva. There were actually 3 individuals, if you want to call them, that they did have relations in the teva. Vekulam laku. And all of them were hit. All of them, right, got punished. Number 1 was the kelev, the dog. And ever since then, the dog is attached. Right? That's why they say that it's always like kashur, like a kelev. It's like attached like a dog. So the dog had relations in the teva. The Orev had relations in the teva, the raven. And Ham, the son of Noach, had relations in the teva. And therefore, his son was afflicted. He had kush. So therefore, right, what happens is the following. So now, when we're talking about now the pigeon, what was going on with the pigeon, with the Orev, with the raven, right? Now we understand what's going on. So the Yonah was the pigeon, and the Orev was the raven. So what happened is that he went and he said, Rabbecha sone'ani, right? Did you realize what's the common denominator in the raven, and what's the common denominator in the pigeon? The common denominator in the raven was the exact sin of the Hamabul. The exact sin of the generation of the flood. Why? What does he say? Your master hates me. 1 second. He was the only animal that was brought in, that species of animal too? All of them were brought into. All the non-kosher animals were brought into by 2. But did you realize he was only looking at myself? Then he comes and he tells Noach, you also hate me. And therefore, why are you sending me? Send somebody else. 1 second. Why are you only thinking about yourself? Yeah? And that's why did you realize, right, that then he says, if you're going to send me out, something's going to happen to me. So what, you're not going to think of an extent? It's extinct? So what does Noach tell him? Noach says, you're a Rasha. Why are you a Rasha? Because you already had relations in the Tiva. And your wife is pregnant of a male raven. So even if I send you out, there will still be more ravens in the world. So don't worry about it, right? Don't worry about it. I'm not worried for you because you already did it, right? You already have another raven, but you're only thinking about yourself. If you're only thinking about yourself, the world cannot be saved by letting know the good news that there's no more Hamabul on your account. So therefore he went and he sent away the raven. That's it. No, he's not going to tell him. Who did he send out? He sent out the Yonah, the pigeon. Why did he send out the Yonah, the pigeon? Because the pigeon is always loyal to its partner. We once mentioned this, if you remember, that when you bring korbanot, the birds, to the Bet HaMikdash, the only ones that you bring is a Yonah or a Ben Yonah, a Torah Ben Yonah. Why? Because it has an incredible aspect to it. Do you know what it has? If you have one of them, that the partner dies, the other one will fly around until it also dies. It will never mate with another partner because once it clings and it sticks to one partner, that's it. It's 100% loyal and it shows loyalty. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. He wants the loyalty. So what happened comes the Marsha, and he says something like this, something very interesting. When the Yonah came, and what did the Yonah say? The Yonah comes back, and he gives this zait, this ale zait, this olive tree, this olive branch to Noach, and he tells him, I prefer that the parnassah should be bitter in the hands of Hashem than in your hands. What exactly are we referring to? So we just learned in Daf Yomi, in Mesech Beitzadav, Lamed Bet Amud Bet, the Gemara there says, Shlosha chayim enem chayim. There are three people that their lives are not considered life. Okay? Ve'eluhen, these are this. What are the three people? First it says, Hamtzapeh l'shulchan chavero. If somebody's going to come and they're looking forward to their friend's table, what does that mean? That's what he was trying to hint to him. He was trying to hint to him, as the Marsha brings down, that a person should be mistapek b'mu'at. A person should be happy with it and suffice with the little that he gets from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not start looking for the excess from other people. Which means, aseh shabatecha chol, ve'at aseh shabatecha keva. That's what he's actually coming. The other two that the Gemara brings down is, mishi shto moshelet alav. If a person's wife controls them, so then their life is not life, because they're always being controlled. We call that censor board. Number three, nishi surim moshlim b'gufo. Somebody that has isurim. When a person has a lot of suffering and they're only just suffering and suffering and suffering, that in itself is bad enough, right? That their life is not life. So therefore, when we're coming back and we're trying to understand, what happened is now we actually understand what's going on. The world was destroyed because of only thinking about themselves. They weren't thinking about other people. The entire world was like that. It was built upon that. So therefore, now that the world had to be fixed by Noach coming, right, and giving always to the animal, this Yonah comes and he wasn't kfui tova. He wasn't coming and telling you, Noach, listen, thank you very much, but I didn't need you for the entire year that you gave me parnassah. He was giving Noach a hint. When you're going to start the new world, even though you always have to invest in other people and give to other people, but remember one thing, be happy with what you have in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, instead of always coming and looking for the other person in order to get more from them. And now we know why the Yonah came to Noach and it said, I prefer that it should be bitter in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but I don't want it to be sweet in the hands of other people. But it wasn't because he was Kfuyeh Tovah. It wasn't Kfuyeh Tovah, but not like the raven. So it comes out that this was the necessity right after the Mabul for the Yonah to come and teach us this message. So Yonah was teaching us that Noach, you're right, you fix the world because you were giving to the animals every single day, and that's what you need to do. You have to give and you have to give. Olam chesed ibaneh. The world is going to be built upon chesed. However, though, you have to remember one thing, right? It should always be that you have to look for yourself and try to be happy with what you have and not to expect more from other people. That's why it's better to be bitter in the hands of Hashem, but not sweet in the hands of other people. That was a message that the Yonah was trying to give over to Noach at the beginning of the new world. Shabbat Shalom. Kal Kadosh, Boker Tov, good morning. Chodesh Tov also. Yes, it was just Rosh Chodesh. I wanted to bring you a short idea on the Parashat, which I think is actually a beautiful idea, which applies to every single one of us, every single one of the days of our lives, which goes as follows. We say that Noach, right, was matzah chen b'nei Hashem. Noach finds favor in the eyes of Hashem. I'm going to ask you, did Noach have a good life? He only had children at 500 years, which means that for 500 years, he was sterile. He was without children. So if he's such a tzaddik and such a tamim and finding favor in the eyes of Hashem, so why did he have to wait for 500 years in order to have a child? Right? Many times we ask ourselves whether we're waiting for something good to come up. Many times it could happen, whether it's for children, for shiduchim, for parnassah, for whatever the case is. And then we ask ourselves and we say to ourselves, but why do we have to wait for so long? And what's going on? But rather, it comes and it says something incredible. Right? It says like this. It says, Chisaron emunah is what actually stops the Yeshua. What does that mean? Something very interesting. Noach, the Gemara says that he was from Ktanei emunah. He didn't have a lot of emunah. Why? Because the Mabul started coming, he was still at the door. Until it didn't really start, he didn't go inside. And the question is, what's going on? He should have immediately come in. He should have been able, right, to realize, 1 second, right? I have emunah that Hashem is going to bring it. But rather what happens is that many times, if a person doesn't have emunah in Hashem, that's what stops the salvation. If we have emunah, that's what brings the salvation. So what happened? Noach didn't want the Mabul to come. In order for it not to come, he didn't want to believe it was going to come. Noach had a lot of emunah in Hashem. But if he had so much emunah, that would bring the Mabul. He didn't want to bring the Mabul. He wanted the Mabul not to come. So therefore, he was kilu doubting Hashem. Kilu what? Is it really going to come? Because he didn't want it to come. Because he knew that if he has so much emunah in it, it will come. Do you know it once happened with the Arizal HaKadosh, that there was a woman that she came to the Arizal, and she was, always asking him for a child. Finally, after so much time, she was driving him crazy. He went and he said, go buy yourself a crib, right? Go this, and you're going to have a boy. She left. She came back 9 months later, and she invites him to be a sandak, right? To be the sandak. He's going to sit on the kisei of Eliyahu Navi. He's looking and he said, but 1 second, sandak for who? She says, you told me I'm going to have a boy. So he said, but what happened? He said, I had a boy. He's looking, he's like, he goes, tell me, what did you do right when I told you that? She said, I immediately went and I bought myself the crib and I brought myself the things and I bought myself everything to be ready. You told me to be ready. He says, in that marriage, you had the child. So she said, what? He says, do you know, I just told you that just that way you should leave me alone. According to your nature, you were never going to have a child. In the merit of the emunah that you had, that's what made you have the child. Because by it was impossible. That's the way it was. It was impossible. But that's what's going to happen. So what happens? We have to actually understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from the beginning, many times, right, he actually puts into us the salvation without us realizing it. Listen to this story. There was a story in Taf Shin Ayin Vav. Okay? This is a story in Williamsburg. Okay? Taf Shin Ayin Vav. Right now we're in Taf Shin Pei Bet, 5782. This is going to be 5776. Okay? So we're talking about a good 6 years ago. A story 6 years ago. There was a bachur that he was building a sukkah. He had a boy. He's building a sukkah. He was on a very, very tall ladder. And all of a sudden, the ladder starts to move. And it starts to fall. When the boy realizes this, right, what happens, right? He says, something's, so he grabs on to something that he has. It's a metal bar. He grabs onto it. But when he grabs onto the bar, what happened is it fell with him. Yeah, now what happens is the mother comes crying out, screaming, Atzala, Atzala, right? They come and they start, trying to see where did he fall. They want to find out. By the time they're trying to understand what's going on and the Atzala is coming, right? Nothing happened to the boy. Nothing happened to the boy. They start finding out what's going on. He fell on top of wheat. There was a whole bunch of branches and everything of wheat, and he fell on top of it. So he was saved. Now, what happened is that they asked, what's this doing, right, in the backyard? Like, what's going on over here, right? So they went and they said like this. The week before, the neighbors, they asked from a goy to clean, right, the entire thing for Sukkot. So what happened? The goy came, right, and he asked for a salary before finishing the job. And what happened is that he left the garbage there. And he left a whole bunch, it was a whole bunch of pile, whether it's, the grass and the wheat and all these things, he left it all a big pile. What happened was the mother, she went and she started going crazy. How could it be, right, that they went and they paid the goy, right? How did they pay this guy, the gardener, without actually coming and finishing the job? You know very well, if you're going to pay a guy without finishing the job, what's going to happen? You're not going to see him again. He's gone. He's gone. So what happened? The mother was going after it again and again. So she says, I don't understand. We're paying, this entire building. What's going on? And she was going very wild. how could it be that they went and they paid, right, this gardener without finishing the job? All of a sudden, right, the reason why they never collected the pile was in order to save her son. So the same woman that she's going wild the week before, how could it be that they paid the gardener before finishing the job? Was in order to save her own son. And that's what a person doesn't even realize. And therefore it comes and he says, do you know why? Right? He didn't have children. So like Rashi says, right? En kan onish. It's not a punishment. Everything was for his best. Why? Says the Midrash, and Rashi brings it down. Amar Yudan. Why is it that all the generations they had children after 100 years? And here Noach had children only after 500 years. What's going on? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Im reshaim hem, if the children would be reshaim, yovdu b'mayim, they would be killed in the water, in the Hamabul. V'ra tzaddik zeh, the tzaddik is going to be suffering. Noach would be suffering. Im tzaddikim hem, if they're tzaddikim, I would obligate him to do a lot of tevot. Because then each one would have to have their own teva. Kavashed mayano, so he stopped him from having children, and he didn't have children until 500 years, in order that Yefet, which is the oldest one, would not be of punishable age according to Hashem before the Mabul. So only in the eyes of a human being, it looks like a punishment. But in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it wasn't midat adin. It was to protect Noach. It was